Thanks again, everyone, for coming. And I'd like to very much welcome our very special guest today, Grainne Humphreys, who is a festival director of Dublin International Film Festival. And I would like to let you all know that she's joining us, of course, from Cannes, and also has us a good story to tell about what she gave up today to be with us. So we'll come back to that momentarily. But just I know you'll all be aware of who Grainne is and the work that she does with the Dublin International Film Festival, but also just to kind of give you a bit of a reminder that, you know, her festival programming work goes back 20 plus years. And even when I knew Grainne first, and we were both working in, well, I was in Film Base and Grainne was in the IFI, and even when you were the education officer there was always a film programming element to everything you did. So you were always, I feel, heading in this direction, to this place. And it's quite fitting now that you are the kind of artistic and creative voice behind one of the country's biggest film festivals and the capital's biggest film festival. But I love that even in your bio, it references Andy Warhol and Agnes, Varda and Harold Pinter, you know, and these were filmmakers that jumped out to you. And then you programmed A Stranger in Fiction, Dublin French Film Festival, which is one of my favorite film festivals as well, on the calendar. And, you know, you've co-edited a number of series on key Irish films. You speak and guest speak. And this is one of the things that often doesn't get mentioned in biogs. Like, you're here with us today, which is wonderful, and we're delighted to have you. But you're constantly on panels, constantly talking. I see you pop up everywhere, and you always saying yes, yes, yes to everything. And I'm sure you turn down stuff too, but I think it's a wonderful thing. You're constantly engaging with the industry, and that's one of the things I think we'll talk about in a little while, is that kind of how festival programmers and artistic directors of festivals can seem so out of reach from the filmmaker. But that's one thing that you definitely don't suffer, Grainne. I feel like you're constantly engaging and connecting with filmmakers, and that's been my experience as a filmmaker as well. You sit on panels for funding for the Arts Council, and, you know, all sorts of engagement at different levels. It's not all cocktails on the croissant, I'm sure, but you can tell us more about that. But I just wanted to refresh everyone. You're cultural and board member of the Irish Cultural Centre in Paris, which is a wonderful further outreach connection for film and for culture in Ireland. And you have been the director of the Virgin Media Dublin International Film Festival since 2007, which is quite extraordinary in and of itself. So anyway, the rest you can read about. There's great articles about Grainne in Screen Daily, you know, you can read it all online for yourselves if you want to know more about the filmmakers that she loves and drive her, and the passion that she has for films. But anyway, you're in Cannes, and it's a good way to open the session with just a kind of, we understand that you program the festival and you pick the films, but what else does your job entail? Obviously travel, and tell us a little bit about where you are right now, what you gave up to join us here today, and also just kind of the year-round calendar of your job. What does that entail? Thanks, Grainne.
Okay, thanks, Vanessa. Wow, that was an introduction. I don't do half of those things, but thank you for saying I do. I suppose the interesting thing is that, yes, I'm in Cannes, I'm in the Airbnb. That's why you've got a lovely door as opposed to the cross-set or a red carpet behind me. And it's a good place to actually have this discussion, because I do start really programming in May. The festival, as you know, takes place in kind of late February, early March. But this is, for me, the first festival that really matters and counts. It's where I can see trends, and already I can tell you, I can share the trends from this year. It's crime, lots of crime films, lots of mystery films, lots of genre films. And if you're a French filmmaker, it seems to be lots of talking about World War I and World War II. And looking back, and the Algerian and Senegalese experience of being a part of the French army. And so it's really interesting. You can see these, it's wonderful. It's like a kind of science experiment. I usually see about 5 to 6 films a day, if I can. I start at a kind of crucifyingly early 8:30 screening and keep going. You meet people, you bump into people, which is probably the nice thing about it. And travel is a big part of my role. I kind of will watch films, as I said, here I'm trying to get to 55, 60. I'll bring them home, like, you know, special, put in a bag, and then I'll refresh my memory as to whether gets bought for the UK or if it stays kind of, you know, slowly like a satellite film. And then over the summer, our submissions will start coming in. And we, just to give you an idea, I have a programming team of about 6 screeners who watch some of our features and docs, and we'll get about 1,500 of those. We'll get about 1,500 shorts, and we only have 100 films in the festival. So when you're looking at those statistics, you'll see that it's a very small team watching an awful lot of films for a very small amount of places. And for anybody who's listening, I would be, my first piece of advice is try to become a screener if you can. Just the sheer activity of watching many, many films back to back, when you're tired, when you're grumpy, when you're hungry, is a really good way of getting a sense of how your films are being processed by film festivals and programmers. The second thing I'd say about that is that I love coming to Cannes because I meet all my fellow programmers and we share the experiences of what we did. Like everyone, we were online for the last 2 years, not this year, but you know, we had that online. We didn't see anybody. We didn't really know how things had gone, been received and worked out. So what's lovely to see here is people coming to see films, responding to them, and telling us how they did or did not work. I make the joke that Cannes is like the bell jar in the Simpsons movie, and it is a bit like that. We're all suddenly enclosed. And I suppose to that, I will tell you that I had put this event into my diary and then realized that there was a screening that I kind of wanted to go to, but my commitment to you, Vanessa, is so strong that I said, no, Mr. Cronenberg, I am not going to see your film. I'm going to talk to Vanessa. So potentially I'll see the Cronenberg in IMAX tomorrow, but I'm a bit scared, to be honest.
Cronenberg and IMAX, just those
too
two
much,
words don't seem to go together. We really appreciate your sacrifice, Grainne. Yeah, you will be rewarded, I'm sure. So just pick up on something you said there, and I do want to move it into the kind of graduating out of college, short filmmaking space, but we can touch in and out of features and docs because it's where a lot of graduates and filmmakers are heading anyway, or they're dabbling in and out of both. But just, you said, become a screener. How does one do that?
Well, to be quite honest, it's going to happen really soon because we're going to open probably at the beginning of June an invitation for people to become screeners. And we usually have like 6 to 10. I'll be sending you and Jean and the IADT gang the information to distribute to the students there and to say, you know, please submit. We usually ask you to send in a CV and to put together a review of a film, and then we'll evaluate that and then see if we'll bring you into interview. But it really is a good opportunity, as I said, to kind of see and watch films and to discover a peer group. And I'd say that's the other side, that, you know, I look at students and I kept saying to you, it's very scary, it's very daunting, it looks like this huge, very scary kind of universe, but it's really easy if you just get your gang together, share your supports, and join things like screeners or volunteer at festivals. And find out. It's amazing how you find that with a very small team, and most film festivals have very small teams, you will get to know people very, very well. And, you know, again, building up your CV, getting an understanding. I mean, Irish film festivals have increased hugely, Vanessa, since you and I were in the IFI days. And so there's nearly a festival for every genre, for all different kinds, but unless you go to them or you work on them, you don't really know what they like or what they're interested in. And then the other side to it is, you know, you can actually, I think, have a great time. It's not just something you have to see as purely in a professional work-orientated space. You know, some of my best friends are filmmakers, you know, and they're wonderful. We all, you know, kind of genuinely like talking about movies. You don't have to see yourself as just being a filmmaker, constantly being, you know, on message as such. You can actually, I think, go and genuinely discover a group of like-minded cinephile fans and friends. And there's nothing better than being one of 7 people in a film. and realizing that all of you had the good taste to pick this film, while some blockbuster plays next door, and I think that's the side that I loved volunteering, was that idea that, there were people, my age or my interests, that I got to meet by being in a cinema, because it's a different kind of experience than being at a normal regular cinema screening. There's something about a festival that kind of gives you an added element.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's something that myself and Jean Rice, the chair of film at the National Film School, chair of film and television, and Barry Dignam, we talk about constantly, is the importance of film literacy. And while, nobody wants to be dogmatic in any way about it, but it does show your passion, and and passion is something that you want to see in a student, in a potential student, in a graduate, and in a filmmaker. And I was thinking there as you were speaking, my first job ever really in film outside of college was volunteering at the Galway Film Flat. And it's funny when you were talking, because I was thinking, and it led to me getting paid very, very little job, but everybody was getting paid very little, I suppose. And I worked with them for a good few years before I moved to Dublin. But one of the things about that, those 2-3 years that I worked at the Galway Film Flat, which started volunteering for a whole festival, and the lead in the first year, was that the people that I met then, some of them including Barry Dignam and people like that, I still know, like in terms of who I know in the industry, an awful lot of it comes from those years, because I was front facing, dealing with guests, and I got to know all the filmmakers in Ireland, and then their work, and then foreign work, and then retrospectives of filmmakers I'd never heard of, like Patrick Carey. I saw the retrospective of Patrick Carey's work in the 90s at the Galway Film Flat, and been introduced to work like that, and incredible, Kirstami, I would have come across at the Galway Film Flat through Pat Collins and all that. And I still do that with you and Dublin Film Festival, like that wonderful, those Chinese films you've asked me to do Q&As with, like that work, that leads me down rabbit holes where I go in after their work and who they like, and you find work that way. So I suppose it's really interesting that that's kind of one of the first pieces of advice, because it isn't just about going and seeing films. It's about the growth of connection and community that you're talking about in Cannes and your little bell jar. That starts way back for you in the IFI, if you think about it, and then it grows from there. But anyway, that's really interesting. So like if we're talking specifically at, say graduates of film courses across the EU with our partners and in the National Film School, and they're coming out with a grad film or the next short and they're looking to get funded, can you talk a little bit about promoting their work, promoting themselves, getting their shorts seen, getting noticed by you and other important festival programs? Because again, that world does seem broader and more daunting. And what is key in developing a plan or a strategy in that regard?
I think the first thing to say is to think about how to make that really part of your kind of graduate film or the films that you're working on, is to think about where it's going. I think there's a lot of people who are really interested, and there seems to be a huge growth area within kind of like film festivals is around supporting graduate work, for instance. So I think that, there's an opportunity. I also think that your graduate showcase is a real opportunity to actually sell yourself and to see your film and your career kind of like starting in a particular kind of, bang, if you think about the red carpets of Cannes, that kind of energy. So, I always say to people, make sure that you have everything, have your website, your materials, that you know what you're actually talking to people about. If that means you have a flyer or you have something that you can actually send to somebody afterwards, the return of the old business card. But, making sure that you come across as an incredibly competent professional person who has a DCP, who can describe what they have. Going back to that cine literacy, make sure that the comps or the comparisons that you have are live and real and exciting and true. Do you know what I mean? I mean, don't say to them that you've made a 13-minute film that reminds everybody of the Avengers, something that genuinely kind of gives a sense of excitement. And I think the promotion thing about it is that we're all different personalities. You know, some people don't like promoting themselves. And what I would do is buddy up like those deep sea divers. Do you know what I mean? I mean, buddy up with someone who can do that. Sometimes it's a director with a producer or a writer, you know, and make sure that you know that even though it's not something you necessarily want to do, but you've got some kind of ally to help you through it. I would look at some of the showcases. There's lots of different competitions. I'm talking to Munich Film Festival, and they have a fantastic film school and festival. I think it's in November. So it seems to me that there are more and more places that you can go to, you can think about. We have a first frame project, for instance, which we have run with in partnership with IADT and many other festivals. But it's also, I suppose, about the dynamic that there's lots of short competitions, you know, and to think about where they could be. And then the other thing is research. Go out there and find other short films that might be similar to yours and track where they went. You know, I mean, there's lots of different supports and pathways. The other thing I'd say is if you're looking at things like Film Freeway, for instance, and some of the platforms which do, you know, create a kind of space for filmmakers, it's just be very clever about what you're doing on it. And be very aware of the people who are looking at it. Will they look at an image? I'm a person who likes a good title and a good image and a good log line. And you can give me all of the other stuff, but I won't look at it before I look at the film. So just be aware of that. And then the other one, which is just the annoying one, is that a short is a short. So please keep it a certain length. Also, yeah.
This is one of the things Jean Rice has asked us to raise. Can Grainne please talk about what length is a short film? Go, Grainne. Everybody listen.
Listen in, lean in. I mean, I've just sat through about 4 films that are well over 2 hours. And I think most times around 90 minutes, you know that you're sitting here for too long. So I would say the same about a short. If you've got to 15 minutes and people are kind of twitching, I think you're too long. So unfortunately, you know, I think generally between 1 and 20 is where I like it. I'd say 13 to 15 is probably my favorite kind of like length. Beyond that, I'm kind of like going, what are you adding that's giving me an extra 5 minutes? And then the other thing, and I hate to be boring, but it's pragmatic, is that, you know, if you make a 30-minute short, it has to be twice as good as a 15-minute short. And you are going to find people who will use that as an excuse. So if you think your film is 30 minutes long, good luck. But realize that people are going to be able to say to you, oh, I really would have loved to include it. It's a masterpiece, but it's just it's too long for us. So, and then the other thing is go and get civilians. I know, I'm sure some students have some civilians, they might even be, you know, related to them, and ask them to watch it and see what they think, because it really is about that dynamic of audiences. You know, a lot of the time you could be watching short films with kind of, you know, professional eyes, and in a sense, obviously that is important. But I think for filmmakers who are maybe putting films into audience-facing events, it's really interesting to see that's a different eye, and how they're probably patience in some cases is very, very short, you know, and they'll already have got bored or gone for, you know, popcorn or something. But I think it is interesting. I would also say, if you can, that you were at your most powerful when you were not a competitor, you're actually an emerging talent, and use that power for good and not evil. So write to all your favorite directors, write to anyone who's influenced you or inspired you, and write an incredibly charming letter. And out of the 10 that you'll send, 8 will probably not reply, but 2 may. And that gives you an opportunity to bring somebody to your screening or ask them to look at your work. But believe me, when you're out in the industry for 3-4 years, no, sorry, suddenly now you're a competitor, now you're looking for the same funding. I'm sorry, all bets are off. But while you're there and you're about to launch, everyone wants to help you. So I would absolutely say that's the other thing, you know, is that you're at a really incredibly exciting part of your career, to be honest, because now, as I said, you've kind of got, you know, all the options are there.
I think that idea of kind of social capital in the film industry is really, really important. I think you're dead right. I think as you're in college, coming out of college, or in those first couple of years particularly, there is a kind of a sense, and I see it with Lenny and Dervla Walsh, they're constantly turning up at screenings. I know some as short films because they're mentoring or somebody has approached them to attend. And I think filmmakers generally are very generous about giving back and giving. So you do have a window there where you can reach out to the person who you admire their work and kind of soak all that kind of guidance and advice in, and it's really, really, and it's a great way to get introduced into those circuits and circles as well. Something and I just want to go back again to sorry something you said, Grainne, about just Film Freeway and the portals and about being clever about applying through those. When you say being clever about applying through Film Freeway, I think I know what you're saying, in that you almost have to become a curator of the types of festivals. So am I right in saying, or you correct me if I'm wrong, that like Film Freeway is not the way you get into the big short film festivals? Film Freeway is like Catalyst in Limerick. Like every short that comes in that I program, I watch every single one, just me, and then somebody else will come in and watch the short list with me as well. But like we do, whereas that's not going to happen. So can you talk a little bit more about just being clever? Because coming out of college, often the only portal or way into us is Film Freeway, or is these initially. I know there's a lot more to being a filmmaker and getting programmed than that, but could you just talk a little bit more about that?
I mean, I think that, to be honest, Vanessa, I remember DVDs. I actually remember VHSs. And what you used to do is watch VHSs and watch DVDs. And in a way, I think Film Freeway, one of its most powerful strengths is actually the fact that it's a catalogue. It's a readily accessible catalogue that's, secure, that allows you to upload all your materials in one place, etc. But it's a labyrinthine, space. And that's really tricky for a filmmaker. I mean, for a programmer, you're effectively just looking at what has been submitted. But for a filmmaker, you're just going into this space. So I would suggest, I mean, charm is the first thing, as I mentioned, about writing to people. But the second thing is very definitely research, is to go and find out in the real world what kinds of festivals you're genuinely interested in, and then think about applying to them, and see Film Freeway, your site there, as a space, do you know what I mean, that you can direct those festivals to, and that you can constantly update with awards or festivals that you're included in. But it is about relationships, and to say to you that the best way to approach it is to work out what kind of film you have and the festivals that would suit that best, and whether or not you approach them individually or whether you approach them via Film Freeway. I would say probably individually, but give yourself enough time. And that's what I mean about starting this process very early. Decide if you've a horror film, for instance, then you should be looking at horror festivals. Reach out to the Irish filmmakers who have gone to many of these horror festivals. We all know them, they're lovely. Yeah. Ask them, they'll tell you who they didn't like, who they did like, who they might be able to introduce you to. And again, just put that list together, rather than going through Film Freeway, where you could have a small mortgage gone and submitting to lots and lots of horror festivals, and you probably wouldn't get a response. So I just feel like people have to be kind of like strategic about how they use it. And then the more that you build up your credits, then it kind of changes. There's also festival formula. There were two people who came over to the festival this year, and they talked about it. And they are an agency. They will take on short films, they will take on documentaries and features. But again, you need to think about the kind of budget for that, whether or not your first film is the one that you want to put this money into, or maybe it's your second. I was going to suggest one of the things you should do is, if I am at these panels, is absolutely ask a question and make yourself kind of visible. Because obviously when you're following up that, you can say to somebody, I was the person who asked the smart question. And again, going back to my idea of charm, there's nothing that works so well in our industry, and I mean global industry, as much as charm and flattery. So if you say to someone, I thought your program was incredible, you're probably the best filmmaker or programmer in the world, you'll probably get the second paragraph read, and it's that kind of thing. It's long-term relationships. I mean, I work in a film festival. I need films. I can't have the best taste in the world, but no films can reach it. I do actually have to work with filmmakers, and ditto for filmmakers. You know, it may not be your first film that will get into Cannes, but you would very easily get into another festival and your next film might get into Cannes. Or, you know, We All Talk is the other thing. I mean, Film Freeway is the platform, but, you know, we could all equally be standing in a queue in the sun in the next 2 days and suddenly go, listen, I've seen a fantastic film. Have you heard about this? You know, I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday, we were going into see a French film about Colleen Keown, and we were just talking about the box office in Ireland and isn't it fantastic? And they said, I don't know this film. And I said, The Quiet Girl. So, you know, that's another side that you have to remember, that that word of mouth and that broader landscape is in some cases can be more of a resource than Film Freeway, you know, which is a kind of locked platform, but it does have its strengths, you know, and definitely one of it is saying, I'm on Film Freeway, they can find you. Yeah. You know, which I think is kind of hard. The other one is just is to go to your screenings, go to the FLA, you know, go to Cork, go to Dublin, support your screenings. Do you know what I mean? Anytime there's an opportunity to kind of tell people about a screening on social media or any awards that you get, you know, it's a bit of work, but you do have to just keep that awareness going because people are watching, you know, and they're seeing what's coming through.
I think that networking element of being a filmmaker can be challenging for some people because it's not natural. But I do think if you start demystifying it for yourself and going to the FLA, going to Dublin, going to the industry events, going to the receptions, the panel discussions, it eventually just happens by osmosis. It doesn't feel like a job of work because you start to become part of the community. And that is true also of travel abroad. Like I remember the first time going to Clermont-Ferrand and being blown away that, you know, Ken Wardrop was the Cronenberg of Clermont-Ferrand. You know, he was the one being like, people were following him around like a superstar. You know, it was like that the short film world had these little not little at all, Clermont-Ferrand is huge, but you know, these kind of microcosms of the celebration of the form. I wanted to ask you, just as you touched on it there, what's your take on short film distributors? We have a couple of agencies in this country, and then obviously there are broader ones, larger ones. Do you deal with them as a festival? Do you go to them looking for work, or how what's your relationship like?
Not so much, if I'm really honest. And I mean, I'm genuinely being really, really honest here. We don't. I mean, we do accept the films when they send them in, and then they're part of the process like they would be in the others. I mean, it's just, I mean, I think there's a couple of EU agencies that are quite good. I think there's one of them that's based in Germany that we've done quite a lot with. But really, it's not. I mean, in a sense, Vanessa, our shorts program doesn't have the kind of Oscar kind of buzz that you would get from the FLA
but you're not necessarily looking at a short thinking it has a distributor that's a tick of quality, or that's you're
we're still evaluating them all. We're kind of going through them. We're absolutely and that's kind of the thing that's interesting, is that you are you know, we have 2 programmers who are programming the shorts. This year we actually had 3 programmers, and what they do is they all watch the shorts, and then they actually, again, like you were describing with Castlist, you shortlist and then everybody watches them all again. So, you know, it is ultimately, and I would always say this to people, there are programmers who are watching all the full, you know, all the films, and they do have their individual tastes. And as much as I'm saying that on a given year, they're the people who I want to be this, we do make mistakes. You know, and sometimes, you know, I've made fantastic discoveries, and then there's also ones where I've literally I got that wrong. And I think for filmmakers, I think it's really important to say that. Do you know what I mean? That genuinely programmers are humans, and that's why the relationship side to it is really important, because you have to remember that they, you know, will maybe be kicking themselves having not taken something, but equally on the other hand, if somebody does take your work, then, you know, they do are, you know, they're recognizing something and they want to kind of create a relationship with you, you know, so sort of build on that. But the idea of the kind of distribution agency, I mean, there's Greenway, do you know what I mean? Which we've
Network Ireland.
Network Ireland. We've taken a couple of theirs. I mean, the other thing I would say is, you know, is obviously where you go in Ireland. Do you know what I mean? And beyond the discussion about online. I mean, for Dublin, we only look for a Dublin premiere, you know, and then in other places it's world premiere status or it's national status. And that is something I would say to everyone is look at what status is required and try and be clever about it, because it's amazing how that is used as a reason not to take something, you know, and, you know, I'd really hate for people to kind of feel again like that's something that you can't have a conversation with a programmer. I would always say, my fellow programmers don't really like me saying this, but talk to us. You know, we are really busy, but we're only really busy for about 6 months of the year. So we genuinely do want to hear from filmmakers at the beginning or at the middle of their kind of like journey on a particular project, because that's when we can help. Do you know what I mean? And I would suggest that you do kind of reach out and ask people, do you think this is something that I should go to Dublin with, or do you think it's something that I should go to Cannes or Sundance, or, you know, and I think somebody, you know, everybody's busy, but it's nice if you do, as I said, like make that sort of like initial request to get some sort of like feedback, because as I said, we're all trying to help people. Do you know what I mean? To get to the right place.
I kind of love that sense of reciprocity in a way, because like you're talking about on Colleen Kuhn and Colin Barraid, and he would have been making shorts at Filmbase, the Irish Language Masters back in the day. And you most likely probably programmed those shorts at Dublin at some point, or they were programmed in a short film program. And that sense of like, do you watch the short programs and kind of, are you looking for the filmmakers of the future, and the relationship builds up and up and up? And then we probably, I'm kind of conscious of time, it's just flown away from us, but I know that people are still sticking with us, and that if anybody has any questions, put them in the chat and I'll ask them. Anything I'm forgetting, but just that kind of, again, notion of relationship building, your role in that it's really refreshing to hear you say, come and talk to me, because if I had heard that from a programmer, you know, as I was emerging out, I think I would have just either run the other way or jumped, probably, you know, most likely jumped on that, because that is one of the greatest offers you're ever going to get, because you're going to Cannes and talking about in Colleen Kuhn. That's Colin, more promotion for Colin, for his film. And, you know, he's come through the short filmmaking process and through the funding process and the exhibition process. But I think it's all so intertwined. And the demystification of that is what I'm interested in for participants. That's the key thing here. And I don't think we'll solve that in this session, but it is this sense of that you're saying, I'm a person, we're people too. And, you know, you're in a room a lot of the time, 5-6 films a day, watching movies. But you know, I mean, I know you, Grainne, but you love to talk about film. Like you love. So if somebody comes at you from that place, it's always going to be a welcome conversation for you, I'd imagine. If they're coming as film fans, cinephiles, it's going to be a good way in. But just maybe by way of kind of, I'm going to pull out some key things from what you said, and feel free to expand on the relationship building again. But I think you've been very articulate about that. Like, let's look at kind of maybe real kind of take home things that people can take out. It's like a couple of things I'm pulling out from what you're saying is, you know, really, really get out there and push yourself forward. It's really hard for some people, but as I said, you can start slowly, just attending events, and you'll find your tribe, even within the tribe. Then I think what you're saying is length, duration. Nobody wants to be dogmatic about how long your film should be. Only you know that as a filmmaker. But look at the programs, look at how many films Grainne is telling us she's getting, like up to 1,600 shorts. And, you know, you've got to give yourself the best chance possible. I mean, we talk about this all the time at the National Film School. And then some of the best films of recent years have been the longer length. So we don't want to be telling, we're here to nurture voices at the NFS, not curtail them in any way. But I think we do have to listen that the form is the form for a very good reason. And then you're tied by time, and also, does your film deserve to be that long? And then another thing that I pulled out as well is images. You like a good image. I do too. Stills. We're always pumping this home. Now it's kind of changed a little bit in that if you're shooting, you know, such a high res, you can do screen grabs, but it doesn't replace a high quality still. It just doesn't. Oh, and here's a good question. Let's come back, maybe think about, Grainne, rounding up about
Yeah.
top tips. They're the ones I pulled out, but there's a few more as well. Barry has got a question. Can you talk about the relationship that you need to maintain after a film is selected, providing materials in time, correct formats, and attending a festival?
Yeah, I was just about to say that. So one of the things that you should absolutely do is, if I'm interested in your film, as in if I send you an email and say, we'd like to show your film, I want your film. So you actually are now in the power seat. So you get to actually ask questions. So you are not some powerless person, do you know what I mean, supplying content. I actually want you. So please ask questions. What cinema are you showing me in? What time are you showing me in? Do you know what I mean? What's the selection of shorts? Where will I be in the program? And I know people are intimidated to think, oh my God, if I ask any more questions, they're going to drop me. No, we won't. We'll actually go, oh my God, that's amazing. They're really interested and engaged in what you're doing with our film, right? And I mean, I think that's really important. We had a graduate from my ADT a couple of years ago, and I'm just going to name drop him, which is Shane Collins. And he is such a good example of the kind of person that you want. Because first of all, I hope he doesn't mind saying, but he got really emotional when we told him that Dub Days was in. And then he was brilliant. And everything, images were fantastic. He came along, he galvanized people to come to his screenings. He told everybody, as far as I know, in IADT to come along to kind of see his new film. He was kind of doing some of the kind of work that we would normally kind of expect to do, but we knew that it was coming from him. And he's a great person in a Q&A. He's a fantastic person in a panel. He always has a question. He's always unafraid to put the perspective of an emerging filmmaker into a conversation with a masterclass or a discussion. You know, so it's not a whole group of people who've been making films since the Lumiere brothers talking about what's important. He's actually kind of trying to bring his perspective in. And I think that is part of it, is I feel now that there is a relationship with Shane, because we went through the dynamic. It's asking about formats. Do you know what I mean? What kind of format do you want my film on? Please, please get the right format. If it needs subtitles, you know, that's the other thing. Please think about putting your film into festivals outside of English language. You know, there's some amazing places. I mean, you mentioned Claremont for All. Do you know what I mean? That's, you know, another side to it. From my perspective, you know, having all those materials ready, and I don't want to chase you. So, you know, I'm quite happy to have conversations with you about where, when, how. But if I'm on the back foot chasing you to get an image, or you know, supporting materials, I would absolutely say that if you have a log line that you feel is the description that you want, we're very happy to work with you on that being the note in the program. So, you know, you can't shape the way your film is described. You know, you do have that role, if you like. And then absolutely, if anybody asks you around PR, if you're interested in doing interviews or radio pieces or participating in Q&As, you know, try as much as you can to absolutely say yes. And then the other thing I'd say is ask about what the festival can do for you. So are there going to be industry drinks? Are there going to be programmer events? Are there going to be workshops? I mean, you don't want, you know, 2 first-class flights, but, you know, push and see, because it's amazing how somebody will actually say they've been really nice, really helpful. Sure, I'll give them the particular kind of like treat or whatever. And then I would say, you know, is keep up that relationship. As I said, I've got a relatively less pressurized 6 months ahead of me. So I've already been in touch with lots of the filmmakers whose work we showed this year, and kind of saying, where are you going now? What are you doing? I'm here with about 17 different films that I have to name drop apparently every time I meet anyone. But it is part of that. You know, it is saying we've got a new award here, we've won an audience award there, and I then just pass it on. So, you know, it is that dynamic of remembering that it's a long-term relationship. It's not a one-night stand. It's actually a long-term relationship where, you know, I want, hopefully when you're Oscar nominated, to still have your mobile number in my phone and feel like I can use it. And you feel like you've got something that you want to show in Dublin, and you have my mobile and you can say, listen, I've got something really good, you know, and that's the kind of pact that we're beginning to evolve. And it's not just with Dublin, it's with many other festivals, you know, but, you know, it is about thinking about it in that long-term way. And back to your idea about images, the image is going to be in the program. And the image is going to be the thing what civilians, my mum, is going to look at and go, oh, that looks good. And we all know, I would say this, flick through a catalogue of a film festival in the old-fashioned ones when we used to print them. Do you remember them? And literally based on films alone, on pictures alone, see which ones you wanted to go to. And I can tell you they'll probably be different in some cases, do you know what I mean, than the ones that you probably would have been drawn to in relation to subject, for instance, or even directors. And I'm really interested in that. So think about it. And a brilliant image, you know, can actually do, you know, a lot of the work of getting you into a particular festivals in some cases, but also will attract press, because if that's an image that works, it's amazing how that image will then suddenly be the representative image for the shorts program, maybe in total.
The first thing any media journalist editor has, what images have you got for me? Yeah. What assets have you got for me that I can put this on a page? And if you have, like it's something we drill home at the NFS all of the time, is images, and it's something that gets forgotten about time and time again. But it's like there are photographers out there, spend the very little amount of money, you know, that you have, but spend some of it on that. Get photographers who aren't used to doing film stills in as experienced. Tell them what you want, tell them what you expect, show them references. So I couldn't agree more, going out. Of course your film has to stand up behind the image, but the image will help get you seen or noticed or programmed. And if you're flicking through images on a portal like Film Freeway, you know, or your shorts programmers that's the thing that will grab. The film has to live up to it, of course. It won't, and then it will be the thing that helps because I noticed with programs, if say any online portal or magazine is doing a piece on shorts, or, you know, they will pull out the best stills and make them the biggest on the page. So it will help then in the promotion, like Barry is talking about, what's expected of you afterwards. And if you do not, and you need more than one, you know, it used to be you needed, like you say, you needed 10, but I think even three to five really good stills, if you're going to have a piece written about you, and 2 will even get you through, you know, I think.
And also get a headshot that makes you look like someone you'd want to talk to.
You know, that's so funny, because I never had one for years. Conor Horgan took one. I didn't even know on a shoot that he was on taking stills, and I now use it for everything, because it's really nice. But it is true, you know, get that shot of yourself at the camera. You know, they're all staged anyway, you learn, you know, so, but just get a nice shot of you that you're happy with. Doesn't have to be a traditional headshot.
Then you don't need to worry about it, you know.
Yep. We have a question in from FilmEU partners there. Any tips when distributing student short films? Should we start applying to big festivals first and then smaller ones? So again, kind of, we've touched on festival strategy a little bit, but Grainne, if you just want to reiterate, and then I will start wrapping up. I hope everyone will stay. I'll start wrapping up now in the next one.
I think it's tricky, to be quite honest, because I think it feels like it's evolving at 2 kind of like rates. So I feel like there's a whole film school kind of distribution or festival circuit that's increasing, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. And then I also think there's some fantastic graduation films which are being shown in the kind of official shorts programs. So it feels kind of like, in some cases, it's like there's a twin track approach that you could take. In a sense, I would be led by some of the lecturers, because I know, like you know, Vanessa, Jean, Barry, there's a great team in IAD2 who would probably be able to advise their students. From my perspective, I just want really good films. And so I just want to see the best films that we can. So if the students want to submit their short films, absolutely, but know that we have a dedicated film student program running parallel anyway. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's from my perspective. And I would also say, you know, go to as many things as you can anyway. You know, I would say, you know, whether you're
but say, for example, Grainne, maybe in the question here, that I know exactly this question, I think that they're asking, it's, you know, do you, even back like 15, 20 years ago, you had much more chance of getting into some of the bigger festivals than you do now, because of the volume of shorts being made. But Like, you've got to spend a lot of money applying to, Cannes or, Berlin,
Oh,
or, like, if you're getting good, you believe in your film, do you spend that money going for those big film festivals and then moving your way down to smaller ones, or is it case by case, or what advice would you give there?
I personally, I think the big festivals are really tricky anyway, because I know the numbers that they get are absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I would actually say that it's probably the exception rather than the rule. So, I would be very cautious about spending an awful lot of money applying. But on the other hand, we all know that there are huge talents. Do you know what I mean?
But are there shorts getting programmed that way? Realistically,
I don't think there's a huge percentage. And I think a lot of them are coming through agencies. But I don't want to say that it's a complete 100% lock off and not a possibility. Yeah. And I'm trying to think, I don't know the gang in the shorts corner well enough in Cannes to be able to kind of answer that. But I do know people who would, do you know what I mean? And I think that's kind of what I would say, is do a bit of research. I mean, Kathleen McGuinness, for instance, is a great expert in terms of shorts. And Katie, who's from Festival Formula. I mean, those are two people I know who are very, very well positioned to answer whether or not a particular film would get into those kind of festivals or not, rather than spending all your money on applying to them. Yes. You know, maybe it's actually worth finding somebody who genuinely would know.
And traditionally that was the route. And if you were funded by Screen Ireland, for example, they would submit your films in a package to the Big 12, they'd call them, or whatever. And then because you were coming with the Screen Ireland brand behind you, we presume those films were getting seen in that way, so that you didn't have to apply, or you could apply outside of that. And then only then were you free to kind of explore. And another network that's really useful, like after you've screened at DIF, if you've been lucky enough to get into Dublin International Film Festival with your short, is the kind of diaspora short film festivals as well, which have a wonderful audience. Like Irish film festivals abroad can be a great way to connect in. And often, and it happened to me, they'll bring you over on a short, or there's short film festivals like, in Finland, or Alcalá de Henares, these ones that are incredible. And there's some in Zurich where they honor the short film so much that they'll fly you over on programming your short. So there's lots of those opportunities as well, rather than, their names in the short film circuit, but not the big 12 or 15.
Having said that, Sharon Badal from Tribeca, she comes to Dublin every year, and she's amazing, and she knows the Irish scene very, very well.
Yes.
And again, going back to this conversation that we had at the start around the idea of relationships, she knows the Irish scene very, very well. She's programmed a lot of shorts from Irish filmmakers and kept that relationship going, and she watches films, do you know what I mean, before they're submitted and stuff like that. So I kind of feel like that's kind of going back to your question. There are people who can have a look at something, see whether or not they genuinely, in their opinion, think that this would actually warrant, expense. The other thing I'd say to you is that I understand about the Screen Ireland support, if you like, for their shorts. But I always think that that's coming from Screen Ireland as a block. Yeah. And it's always really good to have that relationship from yourself. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, I do stuff for the Arts Council, and I'm conscious that more and more people are making films under their own kind of like, structures. Do you know what I mean? Or they may not make it with Screen Ireland or Arts Council funding. And in that case, it's you who is going to be the distributor, sales agent, promoter, creator of that work. Do you know what I mean? So again, there's a Canadian filmmaker who I know is fantastic, but he basically doesn't get an awful lot of distribution, but his films get into festivals. And it is part of the way that he just sees connecting with festivals and connecting with the sales agent as being part of his job as a director. He has to spend Friday morning from 9 o'clock until 12 o'clock following up the journey of his films. And he does this 4 to 5 years after those films are premiered. But that's how he does it. He says it's the only way. You can't defer all of that responsibility. So people coming
And
into
another way we talked about Grainne as well, and I will start wrapping up. It's just so interesting. And having you here just all to ourselves, it's just wonderful. But like we were talking earlier about, you were talking about your peers and connecting in and creating your own community and using that as a base strength to move forward. And we were talking about Cling Films, Damien O'Donnell and Kieran and John, and how like they kind of came out and burst into the scene as a united front. And I'm thinking as well about other NFS graduates like Ken Wardrop and Andrew Friedman and that partnership. Like I've seen Andrew at festivals and he just is the most natural and you can say networker, kind of nearly seems to meaning, but just a people person. And he goes out and he is that representative. So if you are the kind of filmmaker that just doesn't come that naturally to, find your partner that is they are just born to be a producer. They're born to make sure you have the best stills, and they're born talking about your collaboration with them, that your work together. That's another way, of kind of navigating, because it can, we're saying all the things we're saying here. Go meet people, ring them up, email them, approach them at festivals, all these kind of things. Like that can actually be quite frightening and daunting for some, filmmakers who really are like, I just want to be Lars von Trier and I don't want to leave the room or whatever, and so again, I think it is find your tribe, find that, whether it's setting up a company or partnerships, collaborations, there's ways of doing that. Grainne, I can't believe we're supposed to be 25 minutes. It's only been an hour. And I feel like we could keep going because it's really interesting to hear about your own personal take, your own work. And just before we kind of finish up, and we might, I think we've definitely been great that FilmEU invited you in and into this, and that we've had our guests from all over Europe, our partners in today as well, and thank you for coming, but also that it's a conversation that I think we can have annually, because things are shifting and changing. Sometimes they stay completely the same as well. It's all about good filmmaking, but it's a conversation that I'm sure FilmEU or the NFS would always love to invite you back to have with us, because it's just it's endlessly interesting to hear you talk about your work, your own personal take. And thank you so much, and even for all the advice you've given, and even just the importance of saying, I'm here, come find me, setting that challenge almost down, and that's the beginning of the growth of relationships with film programmers.
No, it is. And find out more about film festivals. No, I was just I will be in touch about that screener, so.
Yeah. And thank you so much for giving up
very welcome
your ticket to David Cronenberg's new film. And just before you go, what's your favorite festival to travel to around the world?
Oh, that's really hard.
Are you at it?
I've literally just written a note that's saying I love Cannes.
Okay.
I genuinely do. There's a passion for the art form. That means that 2,000 people at 8:30 in the morning will watch the most avant-garde experimental film, and they cheer when they see something they're impressed with. They leave loudly when they're not. I was saying to someone where it was like people, the sound of film critics arguing at 7:30 on their way to a screening in the morning. It just reinforces why we love films and filmmakers. And lots of other festivals do it, but there's something about doing it in France where, as I said, it is an art form that's celebrated for being an art form, and also has Top Gun with Tom Cruise.
Of course, you got to have a bit of that on the red carpet. Thanks again, Grainne, for your continued commitment and connection with us at the NFS and with FilmEU now as well, which is a great development to see. And it is really tantamount and describes who you are to a T, that you gave up a kind of a sought after ticket to screening, to keep this commitment. That's exactly who I know you to be. And thanks for all your advice. And I feel this is the start of a conversation that we will keep having. So important for the National Film School and FilmEU to stay connected with programmers of festivals, what they're looking for, what excites them, what's interesting. And we'll never forget that you're a person too, Grainne. Don't worry, I promise.
Thanks,
we got that.
So much for talking about short films and the length they should be. Can I record that?
It's recorded. We're going to play that for sure. Thanks again, Grainne. Enjoy the rest of your trip and work at Cannes, and we will see you on your return.